If your company is just getting seats for people to ask things to ChatGPT, you definitely need to change something. If you're a founder, if you have a team, or even if you're working on a team, there might be some systems that are super simple to add that just creates more context and leverage to generate more impact. This is an early stage visibility system where you understand how to create accountability and create a motion of learning velocity that allows you to grow and get the learnings that you need to go to the next stage. Welcome back. Let's do this. So today we're going to see the AI native employee, and we're going to continue our series of episodes where we're talking about AI native companies, early stage startups, AI engineering, all these cool things. A little throwback. Early stage founder operating system is our first episode where we kind of outlined a playbook to go from 0 to 1 million. This is an early stage visibility system where you basically understand how to create accountability and create a motion of learning velocity that allows you to grow and get the learnings that you need to go to the next stage as a founder, entrepreneur building an AI native company. Then you have the AI native company where it's all about context and making context flow across the organization. You have this outstanding visualization right here that shows you that the more connected your context system is, sales with product, with engineering and customers, etc., the more holistic, the more transparent people has access to the information, the better they can take the right decisions for the mission and actually get the most out of this and grow faster. So it comes back to that map, blueprint, multiplier. Awesome. And so in today's session, the goal is to talk about the AI native employee. And so I have two things in mind on this one. The first one being, I want to cover the core ideas around an AI native employee, but also most importantly, maybe give some real examples. And I have an episode that I have pending to do, which is all my setup and how I use the right tooling to be way more productive than, let's say, someone that is average, I would say. And by average, I mean like just the distribution of the number of outputs that you can get in 1 week. So AI native employee, what does that even mean? It comes back to the AI native company and this idea of you're just embracing the right tooling and changing the systems and operations underlying so that you don't change the job, but you change the tasks on how to get to the outcome that you're looking for that specific function or role in the company. What does that mean? Well, let's go through it. The bigger the company, the harder this one is. But what did we decide last week? Having entropy in the business, needing many meetings to have the full context and understand where we're at for a specific decision to happen. This is what we're talking here. And so the idea of an AI native employee is not someone that uses tools like ChatGPT or Claude or even Claude Code and things more advanced, but it's like, how do we treat the company as an information system to make this information flow? What are my day-to-day actions to make that happen so that at the end of the week, I know exactly what I did, what I accomplished, how is it in line with my monthly goals and yearly goals, and how can I self-correct and dynamically evolve this plan on the go? The more I learn, the more accurate my bets and the more accurate my accountability metrics, etc., etc. There is an episode that I would really recommend, which is on the Stripe podcast, Cheeky Pins, with Satya Nadella, who talk about how the real database of the company is inside of meetings and emails, which I think is something simple to say, but actually extracting value from all these interactions and touch points that happens on the day-to-day of a company is way harder than it looks. And so this is why AI native employee is a concept in itself. So for example, every company runs on the same basic loop. The information comes in and decisions go out. The quality of these decisions depends on how much reality your team can see. Most companies can trace how information becomes decisions. They can't tell you why a sales call went well or what worked last quarter because that information wasn't captured in a way that builds on itself. So for example, you are at a company and you're changing your strategy for upselling your accounts because you have some assumptions about your product, but you have no observability whatsoever about the engagements of your clients using the product or like the real feedback that are being done on the customer support, and there is gap between what's being told and reported to leadership versus what's happening with the clients and what the clients are asking for. And so if this gap is not addressed, you are slowly but surely drifting away from the core mission. Hope that makes sense. How do you 10x your day-to-day, which I think is like the fun stuff? I've seen people very impressive on that one. And not only engineers, so of course you have Cloud Code and you have all those tools that can help you not only ship code, but any functions basically now is being automated and you can operate at a higher scale than ever before, which is very exciting. And so how do you 10x? I think it's really a balance between what are my goals and what's the fastest path to get there. And I really believe that this starts with an operating system. Either it's personal, either you have Cloudbot running it. It really doesn't matter. But what do matter is that you have a way to forget less things and do that repeatedly so that you have the discipline to consistently process all the meeting notes, share the core ideas and follow up. And because you're making that information flow around you on all your interactions, and because you're referring back to previous conversations, you're just connecting more nodes, let's say more part of the neural network, if the neural network is like the people system of the company, right? And so because you're activating more weight of the model, you're basically leveraging more out of that model so that you can, in the end, get better decisions, move faster, and do the distinctions between what are the right bets to do next versus not. So I'm going to get way more concrete on this one right now, but fundamentally, this is how I believe that by getting my meeting recorded, I can then, at the end of the day, have my assistant going and taking all my notes from the day and update all my linear tickets and write some emails to leadership and strategies, reflect on some important notes, have it answer specific emails, flag that some conversations could happen so that I get more context on specific decisions that needs to be done. But that to the level of, let's say, just building something, it can be as simple as I have outlined all the options and trade-off that I'm overseeing, and I've consolidated all of that into a clear document and all of that very fast so that we can document more of what we do, we can document more of the decisions that we make, and it's easier to share too. And it's easier to process these information that are being generated. So that's the very cool thing about being a multiplayer is that because you have this system around you that maybe has your yearly goals and monthly goals and weekly goals, and maybe you have different projects and one of them is like the work at your company, but it can also be some personal things. But because you're thinking in a methodical, disciplined way about all the things that you care about and that you bring back to your life and that you flag and that you do not remember because you've built a system around it, that means that you can be way more productive and take way more actions towards the specific ideas and actions and beliefs that you care about. And so all of that is very philosophical, but if you just harness Cloud Code plus Cursor with a very strong understanding of what's possible, what exists, and you go through all the documentation and you very quickly grasp the different code bases and parts of the code, then you can easily create some documentation as you review all the pieces that you need to maybe propose a few options and paths moving forward using also other transcripts and calls that have been flagged or mentioned by sales or maybe customer client iterations. And so if you go back to our chart here, so let's say that you have access to this week sales transcript. You are going to open a Cloud Code session and you're going to say, hey, these are all the transcripts and this is our product and engineering plan. These are recent meetings with customers. And so I want you to outline and map and create patterns and identify things that we should do more of. And because these are the things that we're thinking of, what are like the priorities? You can use the matrix impact versus effort. And so eventually you want the highest impact with minimum efforts. And so you have to balance on that matrix to take the best bets. But once you've done that, going into the implementation, because you've went through all this processing and ideating and weighting the different pros and cons very fast, now you can just build something very fast that goes in the direction that makes the most sense to you now that you've went through this process. And so that's like how you 10x yourself. It's the same thing when you start entering into the code. And so now you have to build something. So you will pass it those documentations and early reflections and all the UX thinking about the next step that you're going to do. And now you're iterating maybe for 30 minutes on a very concrete plan. But that once you click, yes, this is the plan that I want to implement with Cloud Code, for example, or whatever tool, Cursor, AMP, Open Code, whatever you use, Codex. So now it's going to go and implement all that code. And it's here where it becomes very interesting to see what's possible and where you can take things in like weeks. So impact, effort, matrix, that one is very famous, but it's basically like that. And so here you have like many things that you can do to prioritize and reflect. But that skill between defining the tasks that needs to be executed and executing on top of them is where the magic happens. Because the more efficient you are to attack a bigger batch of tasks that needs to be handled, that are like the highest leverage things that you can do with your time to unlock more resources and go to the next levels, the better you are as an entrepreneur or a sentient person, I guess. I think I've been giving some examples, but just to wrap the core idea around the fact that the context happens, context compounds, is that software is going to zero. And so what does that mean? Software going to zero. If you're on X, aka Twitter, you will see this being mentioned many times. What does that actually mean is that the cost of building solutions that automate and deliver on a specific need is going to zero. For example, there is someone recently that instead of going to the doctor or using a tool to analyze their IRM, they basically vibe coded a solution that delivers exactly what they needed. And so that's just an example of now software is becoming cheaper and cheaper. And so the value from here is actually the processes underlying the software. So it doesn't mean that you should not build a B2B SaaS or like productivize your service through an app. What it means is that it's easier than ever. And because the cost of building is going to zero, then the understanding of the industry and the state of the art of the technology and how to provide maximum value with existing tools is where the right questions and the right intelligence allocation lives. And so if you do that very efficiently, and if you deliver on that intelligence allocations, solving the right problems in the right sequence, this is how you get massive implementations and outcomes and results. And that's why you kind of talk about that 10x. So this is the thought process around all of that. I hope it makes sense. I can grab more visuals for the next one. But when I think of the AI native employee, and the core idea behind that is that if your company is just getting seats for people to ask things to ChatGPT, you definitely need to change something, because it's not just about the tools that we use. For example, I want to program, so I'm going to use Cloud Code and Cursor to deliver some PRs. It's more about how do I architect the system so that it will do more of me, meaning that I am still opinionated. I still have best practices on how I want to see my pull requests and my code base growing and how we work as a team. All of those have very strong opinions, but enforcing those opinions is where 10x happens, because I don't have to be on top of all of this if I can automate myself in the processes. So one very specific example is that as a code reviewer, if I've trained any AI that you want, call it Devin, call it Codex, call it Claude, it doesn't really matter. But if I've shared my best practices and what I'm looking for, then that AI can give me back time so that I don't have to jump in right away for those peers. And if I'm solving the peers very well, then I can have another agent, one of those providers that can also like own some linear tickets and build things for me. And so now it's more a matter of, do we have the right vision and strategies and implementation plan? And so now the weight comes back to what are we doing with all the signal that is coming our way, not only from like the engineering and product department, but as a company. And all these signal should be converted into information literacy, I guess is one way to put it, or data literacy is another one. And so how do you leverage all this context to not just buy seats for your teams and employees, but to actually create new systems and like change the way we deliver on tasks? And so the jobs are not going anywhere. And that is something very important to outline here. the jobs and the people working on the team, if they care about the mission and they are continuous learners, these jobs are going to be crucial because the value out of just one job, if using those tools and building those systems as I'm outlining, is where the gap is going to continuously increase and where it's also very exciting to see high performers operating and leveraging their own systems and being so productive to the degree that for some it would be magical or they're not even thinking about it. Because let's face it, we are in a bubble in a way that if you're very savvy and playing with all of this and following X and knowing the latest releases of the models and all the tooling that you have to build with these and have concepts about MLOps and LLMOps, etc., meaning that you care about putting these systems in production and building high-performing teams and creating an impact and added value, then you are definitely in smaller group of people, which I think is very exciting. I think that I've done my best attempt to describe what an AI native employee looks like. And so if you're a founder, if you have a team, or even if you're working on a team, there might be some systems that are super simple to add that just creates more context and leverage to generate more impact. And if you can generate more impact, you are more valuable. And so it means that you're growing and that your skills are increasing, which is awesome. And this is why we're playing this game, or at least personally. So I think that this covers it. I hope that it was fun. We didn't draw much on this one. I might bring some visuals for the next one, but I will see you next time. Ciao.